Dr. Mannion is a child psychologist, and he has been a founder of the YouthNet program in Canada, a mental health promotion program. So please, the floor is yours, Dr. Mannion.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, you're awake. It's excellent. It's an absolute honor for me to be here. And you will see that I will not stand behind the podium because I get anxious and I have to move a lot. So I apologize to those that are trying to film as I'm moving so much. I also wanted to thank Christian and Tutti, because without them I would not have been invited, and they made it possible for me to attend, and it's very special for me. So I appreciate that. And last night was lovely. For those who were able to attend last night, it was a wonderful taste of Finland, and I think we all enjoyed it very much. So I'm going to actually start my presentation with an apology to you all. Because today I'm going to be talking to you primarily about youth and youth engagement, and the fact that I'm standing up here by myself is completely contrary to everything I do in terms of youth engagement. Typically I would be presenting with a young person, and with a combination of the pandemic and the distance and everything else, it wasn't possible to do that. So I will try to bring youth voices to what I do, but it is not the same. So let's start. Hopefully we'll get this working, and if we can have the presentation up at some point would be great. Okay. I just want to take a look at this one picture to start with. You see all these hands up, they're all asking to speak. That's terrific, but I want you to pay attention to the fact that all the hands are different. And the reason that I'm showing you that is because we can't assume that all youth are the same, and that all of their needs are the same, and that one solution or one approach is going to meet all youth's needs. And no one youth can represent all youth, because they are so distinct, with each having their own needs. So I want to start by talking a little bit about COVID, and then I'll be talking about programs that are ongoing during COVID, but are not specifically designed for helping youth during a pandemic. And the first thing we need to know about youth and COVID is that youth development and COVID are not consistent one with another. And first of all, those who have worked with young people know that there's often this sense of invulnerability, like nothing's going to affect me. And I'll tell you a little story. I was, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was in a store, and I had a mask on, and I was in line, I was waiting in line, and behind me there was a young man who came like within 6 inches of me and stood behind me. And I turned and I said, "Would you mind giving me a little bit of space?" And he looked at me and he says, "Why?" "Oh, you mean that pandemic COVID thing? Well, I'm not worried about that, because you're going to die first." He felt invulnerable. He had nothing to worry about. And then his girlfriend told him to move back, and that was the end of it. But that sense of invulnerability is very typical for adolescents. We know that young people are looking at their own independence. They question rules and authority and limits. And imagine the rules and authority and limits that have been imposed upon them because of the pandemic. It goes against their nature. And who are the ones that have to impose those rules during the pandemic? It's parents. And you may have heard that there may be occasional conflict between parents and adolescents. Any parents of adolescents here? Yes, you're the ones that kind of have the eye twitching because you're so anxious. So there are many more restrictive activities. Peers are key for young adults, and yet ability to interact with your peers in a face-to-face manner has been very much compromised. Young people have had many losses. They have lost the ability to attend school, which is difficult for some, a benefit for others, but they've also missed things like extracurricular activities, music, dance, theater, sports, but they've missed things like rites of passage, like their graduation they can't do the way they've had, or their prom when they're finished high school that they've been waiting for 5 years perhaps, is no longer possible. Things that they viewed as their rites of passage, they don't have an opportunity to engage in anymore. So the losses accumulate over and over and over again. They have access to contradictory information. So I live in Canada, and that's right next to this thing, massive, kind of loud country called the United States of America. And they had an election at the beginning of COVID with one of the candidates spreading misinformation about what one should worry about and one not should worry about, and how COVID was going to disappear the day after the election was over, and you shouldn't do this, and you should. Contradictory information everywhere. Lots of extra stressors happening for young people at the key time for the development of mental health issues. We know that more symptoms and signs of mental illness occur during adolescence than any other period in development. So we are compounding their stressors at a time where they're most at risk to develop and show mental health concerns. Our lives have become online. Young people often live online, but there are pluses and minuses of that. Huge innovations in terms of virtual care, which is great, but also there have been young people taking advantage of online much more because they are lonely and they are vulnerable to things that might be very inappropriate for them. So what have we seen? This is primarily in Canada, but after hearing the presentations yesterday, I would venture to say it's very much the same for many of us. We see young people that are experiencing PTSD symptoms, confusion, irritability, anger, lots of different stressors, and the stressors differ by individual: boredom, isolation, conflicts at home, school problems, because some cannot learn virtually. They need the structure available for being in person. And of course, anxiety about the future, their own future. I have one young woman that I see. I'm a clinician. I'm a researcher. I'm a clinician. I'm a policymaker. But the clinician had in me has seen more anxiety than I've ever seen before. And I have one young person who just entered university, and it's nothing what she expected it to be, because she's never on campus. And university life is basically attending canned lectures in front of a computer. And she's struggling. She just can't do that. Young people have told us that they are more concerned about others than they are about themselves. If you're a parent of an adolescent or a child, they're more worried about you than they are about themselves. They're worried about your parents who are even older that have higher risk. Many young people have told us that they're preoccupied with the stress on the family because of COVID and the tensions that might come according to that. And we have seen, those of us that work in child abuse and child neglect have seen an increase in abuse and family violence, unfortunately, during COVID. Much more use of drugs and alcohol by young people, but also their parents. If we're being honest, it's ubiquitous. It's right across the board. As I said before, more mental health issues. Things like eating disorders have increased. If you have a mental health problem already, they all tend to be worse during COVID. But some have developed new problems. So disordered eating has increased. Life has become, for some, more sedentary. They're at home in front of screens, you tend to eat. If you have an eating disorder, it tends to become worse, while access to supports for eating disorders have come down because hospitalized are inundated with physical health concerns. So I want to talk a little to you now. I want to talk to you more now about youth engagement. And I really want to talk about meaningful youth engagement. Now, I'm going to use that word frequently, meaningful youth engagement. Meaningful is not that it means anything to you. It has to mean something to the young person, or there's no true value. And how do you assess whether they're finding meaning in how you are engaging them? By the way, this picture is a mural made by young people. And I'm going to use several murals throughout the presentation, and I'll explain to you near the end the story behind these murals. But they're massive. They're about 5 feet by 8 feet, and they're beautiful, but they're all done by youth, and they all speak to issues relating to mental health. So before we get too deep into this, I'm going to ask you to suspend your biases, to open your mind a little bit. I'm going to ask you not to assume that you are experts at youth engagement. Of course, you all are, but I'm going to ask you to assume that you're not experts at youth engagement and be open to what we're going to be talking about, and not assume that you already know what it means. I'm going to apologize to my psychiatric friends. I have a psychiatrist once, we were talking about youth friendliness and youth engagement, and his answer was, of course I'm youth friendly, of course I engage youth. I've worked with them for 20 years. That does not make you good at youth engagement by definition. If anything, it might be the contrary. It might have gotten you used to talking down to a young person as you being the expert and they're being the recipient of your expertise. That's not meaningful engagement. So what is youth engagement about? It's about creating meaningful opportunities for young people. It's making decisions, letting them make decisions on matters that are important to them at all levels. Authentic allyship, partnership, shared decision-making, shared power. Yes, giving up some power to young people, even if you might be concerned about what their decisions might be. It's not a program. It's not a checklist. I'm not going to give you a recipe that if you do the following 6 things, you're going to be perfect at youth engagement. It's a mindset. It's a culture shift. It requires change, individually and collectively. So what have we seen in youth engagement? So I've been doing this for probably 25 years. And when we started doing it, it wasn't very popular because what people did was mostly what you see at the very end. It works. So we saw youth as the target audience, as the beneficiaries, as the people we were trying to serve, as the people we were trying to help. And then if we were lucky, we saw them as a resource to give us information. Sometimes they were the subjects in our studies, or they provided us information in focus groups. And we would recognize their excellent contributions by giving them pizza. It was called pizza engagement, which is not, that's the lowest form of engagement. And then we saw them as people that can contribute as volunteers on our boards or on our committees and have a little bit of input. Often one young person on a group of 20. That's not meaningful youth engagement. That's tokenism. And now I think we're getting to the point where we see youth as experts and decision makers that are as important level of expertise as anybody else in the room. You might have an MD or a PhD or another degree in whatever you do, but they probably have their PhD in being youth and understanding what that means and how it influences our decisions about what we build for all youth. I'm going to make a distinction here between youth engagement and knowledge equity. And let me just explain. When I talk about youth engagement, to a certain extent, I'm talking about the experience the young person has when they're involved in something bigger than themselves and how that makes them feel. It could be art, it could be music, it could be sports, it could be social activism, it could be policy, it could be research. But really we're looking at ways where young people are having a sense of meaning, belonging, purpose, and hope. And those have huge benefits to the individual. On the other side, there's knowledge equity. What that means is that there should be equality in terms of the kind of information you use for decision making. There shouldn't be a hierarchy. In other words, information from a PhD should not be more important than information from a person with lived experience. Where's the equity in how we have access to information, how we use information? It's funny, we were talking this week about open access journals. So people know what an open access journal is? It's published in a journal where you don't have to pay to look at it. Okay? So people say, that's really great. It increases knowledge equity. We can share things easily. Well, imagine if you're a young person that wants to publish something and you have to pay the fee for that open access journal. You're never going to be able to do it because you don't have the resources to do it. So sometimes what we think is breaking down barriers doesn't necessarily realize the inequities that exist fundamentally in who has what resources to promote their ideas and to promote their knowledge. So when I talk about knowledge equity, think about where the voice is for young people in research, not as participants, but perhaps as co-researchers, or people that decide on what the research questions should be, or how the measures should be chosen, or how you interpret the data, or how you present the data to others, or even how you take that data and turn it into policy. So what's the role for young people in policy development, in practice issues, how we build our programs, in system planning? Here we're looking at benefits to all, not just the individual. So often now when we think about why would you even bother with meaningful youth engagement, we know that there are many benefits to the individual young person. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are behavioral benefits, there are emotional benefits, there are learning and career benefits, there are multiple benefits to a young person through all of this. And if we do it well, we should have an eye towards career paths that are associated with this. And I'll give you some stories later on about young people that, because of their youth engagement, their entire career has been shaped in a different way, making contributions in a lifelong way because of the meaningful engagement at the very front end. We've done some research on this. Dr. Laura Armstrong was a PhD student of mine. Now she's written many more books than me and many more articles than me, and the student has become the teacher in some respects, but we still collaborate together. We did research looking at youth engagement in both urban and rural communities. So this was a study with, I think, thousands of young people. And what we found was when young people were engaged in things that were meaningful to them, the risk of suicide was lower, depressed symptoms were lower, risk-taking was lower, simply by being involved in something that was meaningful to them. And this was regardless of what their risk factors were, the other contextual factors that would have typically contributed to mental health issues. Those were all controlled for. There are also benefits to adults, to you as individuals. So again, I'm not very young. I've been around for a very long time. And when I've worked in youth engagement, it's usually been on the side, not as my main job, it's more as my hobby. When my main job has tired me out and burnt me out and I don't have any energy anymore, I go back to my youth engagement roots and I feel energized. I feel that I remind myself why I chose to do the work that I do. I become hopeful that we can actually make a difference because young people tell me, let's just do it. Sounds almost Icelandic. But they say we should all live by the Nike motto, just do it, right? And that's what they want us to do, is to just do it. But there are also benefits to agencies. We know if you're a research organization, research has more validity when young people or people with lived experience are involved in shaping it. We know that organizations and the outcomes of the treatments and services we provide are enhanced. There's work to suggest that any evidence-based practice that you can think of for young people is enhanced when they are involved and engaged meaningfully in that intervention. So when they are actively involved, even in their own therapy, the outcomes are better. So meaningful youth engagement should be whenever possible and never feasible. And it can be at the individual level for a well young person. In Iceland, anyone from Iceland here today? That's too bad because they were going to get a huge compliment. I am so impressed with the work going on in Iceland. The Planet Youth work is spectacular, and they have realized the value of meaningful engagement, or engagement at least, and they have subsidized that as part of a program to reduce substance use with very good outcomes. So that's at the individual level to promote wellness. At the therapeutic level, I have a psychiatrist friend that their view of youth engagement at every session is planned with the young person, and they take turns writing the clinical note. They take turns writing the clinical note because they both own the session. And the note isn't a secret. It's a record of their conversation and their agreements. Imagine the giving up of power to do that and the shift that it would take for you as a practitioner to believe that you co-own the therapeutic session with the person you're working with. At the programmatic level, will young people not only decide what the programs could be and create programs and are innovators in terms of program development, I've seen young people who are the evaluators of programs, where they determine whether an organization or a program meets criteria for success. I've seen young people that are involved at an organizational level in terms of setting policy. At a systemic level, strategic planning. In my country, I've had the privilege of being on my provincial Minister of Health's Mental Health Advisory Committee, as well as the federal Minister of Health's Mental Health Advisory. And in both cases, as they were talking, I asked them if they were involving any young people. And they said, they asked me, do you know one? And I'd say, no, I don't know one, But I have 3 that would be happy to participate on your advisory because one would be wrong. One would be tokenism. So I want you to look at this picture for a second, and I want you to choose one blue ball and follow it. Just one, and follow it for a second. Okay? And how do you, is it confusing? Now pretend this blue ball isn't a ball, it's you. And you are going through all these shenanigans and pushed around and everything. Now pretend it's not you. Pretend it's your child or your adolescent. And this is how they feel when they're going through a system that doesn't meet their needs. And they're confused, and they feel manipulated sometimes, and they feel like their needs are not being met, and they feel like they're just one more number. Young people often describe their experience of care as being something like this, or navigating our systems as something like this. Of course, none of the systems in the Nordic countries, because I'm sure you've gotten it all right. But in Canada, a lot of the young people describe this. And our goal at the end of the day is to have improved outcomes. Hopefully efficiently, but mostly for the better outcomes for the young person at an individual level. So it could be argued that knowledge creation about young people that does not involve young people could be perceived as incomplete or lacking in real-world validity. So think about that for a second. Do you know what the most researched population is in the world? Does anybody know what the most researched population is in the world? Yes, white undergraduate university students. And we generalize most of our findings in terms of mental health to those volunteers in universities that are the ones that do a lot of our research. Where's the real world validity and the equity when the majority of the world is not higher educated white people in probably high income situations? So some guiding principles of meaningful youth engagement, you have to view them as experts, as assets. You have to, from the beginning, commit to participatory leadership, which means shared decision-making. Authentic relationships, not ones that you're following a cookbook. You're trying to do equity, looking at diversity. Not all young people are the same. Start where they are at, not where you are at. Change what you're doing based on what they are able to do. For example, I had a board, and on our board we had several young people. And we had board meetings. And we realized that having our board meetings at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday did not make sense because they were in school. We moved our board meetings to Fridays and Saturdays, Friday nights late and Saturdays. And we paid them to come because everybody else there was being paid by their organization to be there. But they weren't. And we weren't going to pay them by serving them pizza. So how do you change your processes? And sometimes it means taking a risk. So, well, I'll wait. I'll tell you about when I get to YouthNet. So when you're looking at youth engagement, you have to think about things you need to do before you actually do the work. So how do you co-activate? How do you train your staff and your personnel or your organization or your ministry ahead of time to understand the change in thinking and behavior required to be legitimate and to be effective in terms of meaningfully engaging young people? So how do you prepare your staff? When do you bring the young people in? Don't bring them in after you've developed the first draft or to get feedback on the proposal. Get them in before you conceptualize things at the very front end so they can be co-creators of your plan, of what you build together. And then you get to your co-creation part where you truly work on communication, shared two-way communication, where they can have an impact on processes and outcomes. The experience of what's going on and what you collectively accomplish at the end of the day. And there's co-ownership as well. Co-ownership means if it's a research study, perhaps the young person's name should be on the publication. And I'll go a little bit further. I had an argument with a colleague once because we had a young person that was taking a leadership role on a paper, and I suggested that the young person's name be first on the publication. And my colleague, who was a researcher, said, well, they're not an academic. Why should they have that? And I said, well, think about it. You already have 100 publications. This young person has no publications, and it's going to influence their career. They've done more work than you or I combined, and they were there from the beginning. Why can't we put their name first? Well, that's not how it's done. Well, maybe we should change how it's done. And we did. So co-evaluating is even to find out whether you've done it right. Have you engaged properly? Was it a good experience? How would you modify this over time? Where is your continuous quality improvement with regards to your engagement activities? Now I'm going to give you some concrete examples, and Frederick, you might recognize this picture, about youth engagement in action. And the first program I want to talk about is the YouthNet Réseau Ado program. This was developed in 1993. I was practically a youth myself. And it was after a national survey of youth attitudes towards mental health and illness. And a colleague of mine, he's a psychiatrist, Dr. Simon Davidson, and I did a national survey where we asked youth about mental health and mental illness and who they talked to and stigma and everything else. The agreement we had with the funders was that after this survey, they would then support us or help us do something else. And we tried to figure out, what should we do? Should we write a book? Should we do another study? What should we do? And we were sitting down having coffee, and then we said, well, wait a minute, what did the young people tell us? They told us that we don't ask them enough. They told us that they mostly talk to each other. They told us that they have creative ideas. They told us that the majority of them are doing well and want to help others. So maybe rather than trying to do something for young people and create another program, we should invite them to create a program. And that's what we did. So from the very beginning, youth developed a program where the goals were stigma reduction, promoting positive coping, and enhancing help seeking. It was a combination of health promotion, early identification, and early intervention. And it was run by young people, for young people. Now, young people in that national survey told us that they believed that they wanted to talk to people that were a little bit older than them. They thought that psychiatrists and psychologists were these old white guys who kind of like fell asleep during sessions and told them what to do. They would prefer that the psychologists and psychiatrists get their degrees by age 20 and retire by age 30. So we decided that the facilitators for YouthNet should be between the ages of 20 and 30 and trained by youth, which is exactly what we did. When we started, at the very beginning, just to give you a sense, we were working in a hospital. I was a psychologist, but I was also, at the time, the director of psychiatric research. And we started this program, and we hid the program in my lab because we didn't know if people were going to accept it or not. And then we kind of persuaded the hospital to give us space. So they gave us this little cottage in the front of the hospital, which was a condemned building because there were mice in the basement. And we were happy to have this. And the chief financial officer of the hospital, when we started, said this to me: if these were kids in my neighborhood, I would tell them to go play somewhere else. That was their view of engagement of young people. They were annoying. They were going to be doing things that were going to cause problems for the hospital and maybe damage the hospital's reputation. And then this chief financial officer said to me, if you run this program, just so you know, if you go over budget by $1, it's coming out of your salary. So in 25 years, we've never gone over budget. Not once. At the end of the program, I left several years later, and the program is still going on today. At the end of the program, this chief financial officer became a champion for YouthNet. He would go to funders and claim wonderful things because the program, whenever an evaluator would come to evaluate the hospital, they would always point out this youth promotion program that was community-based. People wouldn't come to the cottage. The facilitators would go anywhere within 2 hours of the hospital. And they would do work with youth in basketball courts or under trees, homeless youth, gay, lesbian, transgendered youth, New Canadians, Indigenous youth, incarcerated youth. They go into jails and work with youth, wherever youth happened to be. He became a champion. And the program itself became recognized by Accreditation Canada, which is an overriding body looking at health services in our country. YouthNet was then described as a leading practice in Canada. And we reminded him of this statement that he had made. By the way, the youth took this statement and wrote it on the walls of the little cottage to remind them every day about the mountain they were trying to climb in terms of changing attitudes. So at YouthNet, it's a combination of universal programming and targeted programming. So the universal programming is around stigma reduction. It's about coping strategies. They do this in a combination of workshops and mental health fairs and going into schools. They used to do it with focus groups where youth were engaged on a one-to-one basis. And most of these things are now done virtually. But they all had programs which were more targeted in nature. And they were all programs developed by young people. A Pens and Paints program, which was an arts-based program. There was a program called Rooted, which was hiking and other outdoor activities. Mindfulness, which is a combination of yoga and relaxation training and mindfulness. A whole bunch of winter activities as well, all run by youth. All the ideas were by youth. So it's a nice, and it's, again, every one of these activities had a clinician on call. For any young person that was identified as having a problem. All of these programs had evaluation embedded into them. Oh yes, we had a youth advisory committee. We still have a youth advisory committee, a YAC. The YAC is kind of like the board. So at the beginning of YouthNet, we started to have some success, and the government of Canada contacted me and said, Dr. Mannion, we would like you to come and speak to us about this YouthNet program, and could you please send us your bio and your slides? And I said, well, I don't do that. I would go with a young person. They said, that's fine. Make sure the young person sends their bio and their slides. So we went to our YAC and we said, we have an opportunity to talk to the Canadian government about this program. And they've invited me to come, and I think a young person should come, and we should really kind of role model what we do. And we were in a meeting. There were 9 of us. There were 7 youth, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist. And the youth said, we should all go. I said, no, you can't have 9 people go to talk to directors and managers in government. And we talked about it, and we said we're going to have a vote. So the vote was 7-2. You can imagine how those kind of broke down. So we decided 9 of us were going to go. And the youth went half an hour early and put words on the walls: engage, empower, respect, listen. It's about us. All the equity, diversity. And then we had 9 people speak, and our moderator was a 16-year-old girl who wrote, and everybody had a little bit of time. And the government gave us 45 minutes. So an hour and a half later, when we were done, oh yes, the government people came in and they didn't know what to expect. But they're the ones that allowed it to go an hour and a half, and nobody left. The next day, the Director General, who had asked me to come, called me and said, we are giving you funds to replicate the program across the country. And the only reason we're doing this is because you actually walk the talk. You don't just talk about engagement, you live it. And we saw it. And honestly, the stars of the show were not the 2 old guys. It was that vibrant group of young people. So that's very significant. So everything done at YouthNet is evaluated. The lead for research changes all the time, but the one that I was the closely associated with, the director of research with YouthNet, was a 22-year-old. A 22-year-old was designing research, was choosing measures, was writing up the reports and presenting information to policymakers, decision makers, young people, and general community. A 22-year-old. This is the kinds of things that we have seen, and the slides got messed up a little bit, but we've asked them who they talk to. Young men, almost half of them tell us when they have a mental health issue, they don't talk to anybody. And they do talk to anyone, it's most likely to be a friend. Young women, it's mostly friends, and then young people, no one. The next highest one would be family, and that's not just parents. It could be siblings, aunts, uncles. This very slight black sliver here, like it's 1% or 1.8%, that's us. That's professionals. How many young people would think of talking to one of us first? And then a combination of other things. For those that are in the targeted programs, those that have chosen to go in the Pens and Paints and things like that, we also have a screening of all of these people. And look how frequent the thoughts of suicide are. This is thoughts of suicide in the last 2 weeks. Oh, no, sorry, in the last week. And it's 20 7%. Those who have actually have in their lifetime a suicidal gesture, 29%. These are significant numbers. I should go back for 1 second. In this particular slide, we also looked at the same kinds of things for those that are suicidal. A third of those who have had suicidal thoughts or suicidal behaviors told us they never told anyone. That's kind of terrible. But it's actually great news. You know why? They had just told us. You can create a situation where young people can start talking about things that they never would have talked about before, sharing things that might put them on a path to receive supports to do better. So this in terms of some outcome stuff, you know, we work on connectedness with young people, and young people that are involved in the program say like almost 74% that the programs help them feel more connected to other people, and to the group itself that they belong to. Even more felt a sense of belonging. We know that that connection, the sense of belonging, is protective for so many things. So many things. Just imagine the number of people that felt disconnected or still feel disconnected during COVID. I want to tell a story, and I'm really bad with time, Christian, so yell at me whenever you want. I want to tell this person's story. This woman, I don't know how old she is. She's probably 40-something. Her name is Isabel, and I have permission to share this story. And these are youth that she's with. These are youth in the YouthNet program that she's with. Isabel was a youth in YouthNet. When she was 16 years old, she came to see me as a psychologist. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, severe conduct disorder. She'd been sexually and physically abused. She was a cutter. Her arms were scarred all the way down. She was abusing drugs and alcohol. And she had been kicked out of every hospital in our community because she was a shit disturber. She was a troublemaker. And somehow I had to find a way to help her. So in my infinite wisdom, I brought her to YouthNet because I said, I can't do it. And at YouthNet, one of the facilitators asked her the most important question that she was ever asked in her entire life. When do you feel good about yourself? And she stopped. And she said, when I'm snowboarding, I feel great. The wind's in my hair. I'm just thinking about that. The mountain is spiritual for me. I'm really good at snowboarding. And I wish the other young people could feel that too. And then we say, well, why don't you do that? Why don't you help young people experience snowboarding the way that you have? And she says, well, that's not possible. I'm a little piece of shit. I can't do anything. And then YouthNet said, we'll help you. They helped her develop a snowboarding program for youth. And it was called Free Ride. And it wasn't free. She had some conditions. One condition, it couldn't be free. It was for 5 weeks in a row. She brought homeless youth that were in the hospital, youth from a private school, very diverse, snowboarding for 5 weeks in a row. It cost them $1 every week. $1. Because she said even a homeless youth can find $1. For the $1, they got Thank you. They got a bus ride to the resort. They got ski lessons. They got a banquet at the end. And the other condition for her was that the psychologist associated with YouthNet had to go snowboarding. And she had to be his coach. So the psychologist who had a patient was now the student that had the patient as a coach. Talk about empowering. And I fell a lot. Okay? This young woman's goal in life was to be dead by the age of 18. If she wasn't dead by the age of 18, she was going to kill herself on her 18th birthday. She's now in her 40s. She's not dead. Part of her job, or one of her jobs, was she was part of the advanced security team when our prime minister visited different countries. And now she tells people that someone listened to her at the right time, asked the right question, and empowered her to do something about it and changed her life. So that's resilience. Resilience means having adversity and the ability to overcome adversity or bounce back. Without adversity, you can't be resilient because you don't learn how to bounce back. So I'm just going to quite quickly do this. Any clinicians in the room? No clinicians. Okay, any smart people in the room? Look at this young 11-year-old girl. Does anybody know what her diagnosis is just by looking at her? Guess. Eating disorder, very good. Smart woman, she gets 2 desserts at lunch. This is an 11-year-old that had a severe eating disorder. Her parents brought her to a hospital. They hospitalized her immediately and put her on a heart monitor because she was that severe. She, in the hospital, started talking to cleaning staff about what could she ingest to die because she didn't want to live anymore. And then she became mute. She stopped talking. Eventually she started talking again, and she spoke with a psychiatrist who asked her, "What can we do to help you feel better?" And she said, "Make my father less sad." That's that same young woman now, many years later. She couldn't attend school before. Now she travels the world. She's worked as a flight attendant. She has confidence. She manages her anxiety that will never go away. And the goal wasn't to have it go away. And her dad is less sad now. I'm her dad. Okay? And what she did was learn resilience. She got all kinds of help. Someone asked her a different question at the right time, but it also shows the interplay in terms of what goes on in families as well. This is another person you might recognize. This is someone with Down syndrome. She is not as smart as anybody in this room. Never will be. But she has jobs. She has relationships. She does extremely well. She's a Special Olympian. She's the slowest swimmer you'll ever want to meet, but she loves it. And it's another daughter. That's resilience. Adversity and the ability to overcome adversity. So when we talk about mental health and mental illness, sometimes we talk about we are either mentally ill or we're mentally well. And then young people believe that you're going to be either categorized or broken or fixed. And I suggest that's the wrong way to look at things. The other way is we can look at someone who has good health, mental well-being, and they're flourishing, or mental well-being that's not so good. You can be someone with a mental illness and you can flourish. With the permission of my family, I say at these times that I'm someone with lived experience. I have depression and anxiety. I've been medicated several times. I've been in therapy. But I think I've done okay. I think I'm fairly resilient. I think that I know with I've been sick since I was 8. I've suicidal thoughts since I was 8, attempts into my adolescent years. As I got older, I realized that I wanted to be the psychologist that I needed when I was a little kid. And that's what I strive to be. Is that resilience? How can we put young people on paths so they can make decisions to help others? So I'm just going to talk quickly about some other programs. I'm not going to go in great depth. All of these are going to be available on a list for you if you're interested, but there's many more things available. So Mind Your Mind mixes technology with young people, and young people develop new programs in design labs, which is fascinating. The Center of Excellence for Youth Engagement has developed standards for youth engagement, looking at the quality of the process and training for organizations about how to do it right. And they have a whole slew of tools about how to do that. The Dare to Dream program is an example where they have given money to young people to create programs, and they've been leading it. The Art Mural Project, I mentioned. These are young people that create art. And in this picture, this is about stigma. This is a person with a mental illness. These are all the other youth. They say all youth are different. It's not this person's goal or role to get well. It's our responsibility to reach to them, connect with them, and help them on their journey. I'm just going to bounce to the end, but these slides are available to you. But the take-home messages, start early. Engage young people at the very beginning. Co-create with them. Share the load, share the power, share the decision-making. Think about who in your organization should facilitate this. It doesn't happen magically. You have to work at it. Share information, communities of practice about how you're doing things. Build the relationships. Celebrate when young people are doing things well. Evaluate everything you do. Do what you can with what you have where you're at, even if you start small, because it's messy. And you have to be prepared for messiness. I'm going to pass on this because we're out of time. Okay, but there's a beautiful video that I'll share with you some other time, or I'll show you online, the IIMHL initiative that Frederick is part of. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for an highly inspirational and also very personal talk. We do have a break now, but before that, we have time for a few questions from the audience. At least there is one question over here. Lydia Lazzeri from WHO, please.
Thank you very much, and I join Christian in thanking you for a very uplifting experience sharing. I have a question. I noticed in the pictures that you shared that the people that are in those pictures are predominantly female, and I'm wondering, from a gender perspective, are we encountering a similar thing when it comes to, for instance, healthcare becoming the profession of females, and so on? Thank you.
Absolutely right. So we know that it's much harder to engage young men than young women. In the YouthNet programs, historically, about 40% of the participants were young men and 60% were young women. Those who want to get involved more actively, like in the youth engagement committees and stuff like that, even higher predominance of females. So we had to look at how are we engaging young men, and what different ways do we need to do this, and what are the barriers to that? Young men don't necessarily have the same history of social networking, of being able to communicate feelings. We don't have as many role models about that. I do a lot of coaching. I coach basketball. I've done much more mental health work coaching my basketball players than anything else. And when I've coached them, years later, they've called me when they have issues. So sometimes the avenue may be a very non-therapeutic approach to give them different ways or different people that they can connect to. I'm also a very emotional person. So my young men that I work with have seen me cry, right? Which is perhaps foreign to them, but all of a sudden it legitimizes all kinds of different feelings. There's a large men's movement. If you look at Movember, they're looking at mental health and supporting programs where men are doing things for men. Indigenous community, we're seeing drumming circles, for example, all kinds of things that are happening now for young men. It's the right path, but we have a lot more work to do. Frederick.
Completely inspiring, Ian, of course. I had one kind of particular question. It's the question of, so if kids and youth do spend loads of time on internet in different ways, or in gaming, which I think is a really interesting way to talk about, maybe particularly male-dominated. Are there innovations that you've seen that focuses on how to reach into the gaming world with these, and do the YouthNet develop those kind of interventions?
It's not, so YouthNet that's not one of their areas. Mind Your Mind really uses technology. Out of New Zealand, there's a program called Sparks, which is a game, and the game has been shown to it's for depression, and it's has great outcomes. I think the British Medical Journal has published that in a randomized controlled trial where the outcomes were quite much better. I was part of a research group where we looked at the Sparks program and we brought it to Inuit youth in northern Canada, in Iqaluit, which is the far, far, far north, and they have translated into Inuktitut, which is their language, and they have changed all the visuals and all the cultural things to fit for their culture, and youth are co-creating a new version of this. So there are opportunities to do that. There are researchers in Australia that are looking at gamification as a way to engage people, using the same tricks that industry uses to addict us to video games, to addict people to helpful kinds of online activities.
But do you also go into the existing games, because of course there's going on a lot within many of them of ongoing conversations? So presence with people who knows a bit about this, that may have the training that people in the youth advisory could be actively there.
There are spies among us who are looking into the world of gaming and are learning all of that way of doing things. And I know from a social media perspective now, social media what's it called? Conversations are being monitored for suicide prevention, and it's done using technology. And it's quite advanced. So I think we have, again, some inroads, but we can do much more.